Good morning. We are delighted to welcome you to VHI House here in Dublin. Today's event is proudly brought to you by VHI and is part of our series of events for our Community Wellness Programme. My name is David Gillick and I've been a VHI ambassador for nearly 10 years now. And today I'm delighted to be joined on stage with the Parkrun founder, Paul Sinton-Hewitt, CBE. Paul, you're very welcome to Ireland.
Thank you very much, David. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today.
Paul, it's been an incredible journey for Parkrun. I suppose, look, the most simplest way to ask this question is, how did it start? How did it come to be?
Well, I'd like to start by not answering that question, by just thanking Brian, thanking VHI, and thanking you, volunteers, for doing everything that you do to make today possible. It's an extraordinary privilege to be here. You'd think that it would happen to me all the time, but it doesn't. So when I do get invited to come to Ireland in the first place, but then to come to VHI, it's really, really important to me. So I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you so much for having me. Going back to your question, it's been a very, very long journey. We've been Parkrun for 20 years, but the fact is, I was a runner at school. I did 1,500 meters, I did 800 meters, and I did cross country. Not particularly well, but well enough. I gave up running after school, went to university, did the army, all that sort of stuff. Really didn't do much physicality stuff. And around about the age of 24, newly married, young children, I decided to take up road running. I joined a club and I started to make improvements. And as part of those improvements, I started to target half marathons and marathons. What was available to me in South Africa at the time was the clubs would put on a free, really simple time trial, 2 or 3 times a week, all across the country. And in where I lived in Johannesburg, my club did a 5K on the Saturday. One of my friends' clubs did an 8K on a Tuesday. Then on a Thursday, I could do another 8K, and on Friday, I could do a 10K. These were free. They were mostly attended by athletes. And what they did was you arrived, you didn't tell them you were coming, you arrived, you got the start line, you ran the race, proper race, and when you finished, you just went to a man on a clipboard and you said, I was position 5, and you gave your name, and then you waited for the Sunday papers. The Sunday papers came, and it was extraordinary looking at the back of the papers, and you had all of the athletes who had taken part in these time trials in the newspaper on the Sunday. And so there wouldn't have been more than about 50 people. And I knew them all by name, and I could tell their PBs, and the thing that really came to me was that as I was progressing in my athletic career, I'd start to run a 10K and then a 15, and I was targeting ultimately the marathon. And I realized that if my A race was coming up, I could go down to the local time trial about 6 weeks before, and I could lay down a time. And then I'd go back 3 weeks later, and I'd try and obliterate it. And if I had, then I'd go home and I'd do all the maths. I'd down to 3.5 minutes a kilometer. What does that mean? Let me extrapolate it to a half marathon, see what I can do. And I used to believe my own hype pretty much. So if I could run 5 kilometers at 3.5 kilometers, then I could run 21 kilometers at 3.5 minutes a kilometer.
That's quick.
And so, no, I couldn't.
That's quick.
I couldn't. It was all in my head. But so that was there. And then, of course, I entered an international career. I came over to Europe. I lived in Belgium for a while. I didn't really run, et cetera, et cetera. I joined an international software company, and I was all over Europe. And then coming towards the end of my 30s, I realized I put on a little bit of weight. I needed to get back into doing something. And running was always there. Running has always been something that I've done, even if I didn't do it in an organized fashion or with a club. So towards late 30s, I joined a local club. They were really a drinking club with a running problem. And I found the social element was really what appealed to me. It's a rather lovely time, but I couldn't help myself. Yeah. I was just, that competitiveness in me just kept coming through. And so before long, I was targeting half marathon, and then I started to think about what can I really do at the marathon? And I had this time that I had achieved before, and I thought I could beat it. And so all of these things started coming back. And then I got injured. And the injury was severe. It was a very, very bad injury, which meant that basically I was going to be sidelined for a minimum of 2 years, but possibly edging 40, I was never, ever going to be able to run properly again. And I'm someone who has suffered with mood swings. That's what I used to call them, mood swings in the first part of my life. I'd have these mood swings, and I knew that if I just went for a little run or a jog, it would settle things down. But I didn't call it depression because, of course, nobody really knew what it was at the time. But in my late 30s, having had a really successful business career, high-pressured, and all of the things that come with growing a family, it was now starting to become a real problem. And so running had been a part of my self-help tool, my help kit. And now this was taken away. On top of that, at about the same time, I lost my job. And just before that, I ended a relationship. So everything was conspiring to really cause me a lot of trouble. And I realized that the one thing that I had that would really help me would be the running. And I couldn't run. So the next best thing was to be with people who ran. And I kept thinking, well, you're probably a has-been. You're never going to run again properly. So it's time to do some volunteering, because I had never volunteered before that. I'd never done anything like that. I was aware when I was running that there were other people who were looking after me, but I never thought it was my turn. Turning 40-ish, all of these things happen. I think, okay, well, what can I do? And of course it comes to me, what about those time trials? They don't exist in the UK. It's something new. I can make it 5K. It can be so simple, so easy. I won't ask anybody to help me. I'm not even going to ask permission. In fact, I'm definitely not paying for insurance. So I just invited, I went to 2 clubs that I knew, and I said, I drew a flyer and I put it up on the wall and I gave a little talk. I said, look, it's just simple. I'm going to be there every Saturday. You come down, there's a start line, there's a finish line. I'll do the rest. You don't have to do anything. And we'll see what happens. And of course, October 2004, 13 people pitched up to run. 4 people who I hadn't asked pitched up to volunteer. And that wasn't a thing in those days, so I didn't even write their names down. Those 13, I set them off. I said, if you get the course wrong, it's very, very simple, but if you get it wrong, you just come back next week and you'll get it right the next time. There were no marshals. It was very, very simple. I was nervous. Everybody was dressed like an athlete. They all had vests and shorts, although it was October, so it was, they had tracksuits and stuff. And everybody was on the start line like that. As they finished, I gave them a token that I'd manufactured myself from Halfords. And they went to the back of my car, they wrote their name down. Very, very simple. And I then went to the coffee shop, invited everybody to come with me, and I did a quick Excel spreadsheet of the results. Very, very simple, matched the times with the runners, and so on. And that was the start. Wow. And here we are, 20 years later. I think we're about 2,500 events around the world. 400,000 people participate on a weekend. 10 million people registered. About half of that have actually participated. It's quite an extraordinary leap. And, no one could really believe that on that day that anybody could have thought that this is what we were going to be.
It's an incredible journey, and I think you articulate it so well. Did you ever expect it to get to this point? Like when you set up that first run and got 13 people, did you ever expect that it would get to this? Or did you even hope?
No, well, to begin with, I only ever hoped for one event, Bushy Park Time Trial. And what was extraordinary about those first year, so 13 the first one, 14 the second one, and 12 the third one. Christmas Day happened to be a Saturday, and I said, I'm there every single Saturday. So Christmas Day had to happen, and then New Year's Day had to happen. And the numbers swelled, and what was extraordinary was I expected athletes to come and attend, club members, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Quite often, the club member would be on the sideline while his wife was participating. And so the feedback I was getting, and remember, I had no grand plans. It was simply one event, my event, for selfish reasons. I'm dealing with my mental health. Even if I didn't know it, that was really, really important. So all I wanted to do was to give a single event where people could participate for free, forever, and have a great time. It didn't matter who you are, how fast you went, whatever, everybody was welcome. But the feedback I kept getting was actually, this is for everybody.
Yeah.
This isn't just simply about the people who are focusing on a target or a dream or whatever.
Yeah, because it's interesting because Paul mentions marathons and stuff like that. You're 2 hours 36.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, that's shifting, all right? So, like, the 5K, for someone who's coming from your background, 5K for a lot of marathon runners is quite a short distance. And it always kind of, the question would come, why 5K? Again, from your background, or subconsciously, was it that you wanted more people to get out and be active? Or was it easy to get in and get out of the park before they...
Well, absolutely, the in and out of the park was a really, really important thing. I'd said to my partner, she's now my wife, some of you know her, Jo. I said to her at the time, look, I'm doing this thing, and I'm going to be there every single Saturday. And I don't think she had a clue, but she said, all right, yeah, fine. If it gets you out the house, fine. The thing about 5K was that when I was a proper runner, I wouldn't pay a dime to do a 5K. It just was never, ever going to be something I would do. I would run 5K on my own, but there's no way I was entering a race to run 5K. So there was this thing about it had to be free. It had to be simple enough that anybody could do it. Yeah. I didn't really want the volunteers standing around for too long, me, the volunteer. I wanted to be in and out, and I wanted to get to the coffee. These things are subconscious, and they become real as you progress with them. If you can follow a passion, you won't get it right the first time, but by the third or fourth time, you start to realize what works and what doesn't. And of course, parkrun happening every single week, we did. Yeah. We were fixing things all the time. Eventually, we got it right.
Was it even called Parkrun?
No, so the Parkrun thing, it was... I've written a book and I'm telling you all the stories. The Parkrun thing...
It's available in April, okay? So be sure.
The Parkrun thing is really, really interesting. So, and I'm going to swear, but it's in context, so please just forgive me. But it was called UK Time Trial. It was called Bushy Park Time Trial, and then Wimbledon a common time trial, and then Richmond Park Time. So the TT was a common thing. So I created a company called UK Time Trial. And I did that when we got our first bit of cash, which was about 2 years later. And I did it because I wanted everything to be above board. I didn't want people to think I was pocketing any money. So I recorded the cash immediately. And it's something that's in my background. One of the reasons it had to be free was because I just couldn't deal with getting rich off other people. It just didn't work with me. But I forget the question.
When was it called? How did the
Parkrun.
Yeah.
So we had about 10 or 15 park runs when I was approached by Nike and they said they might want to work with us. And we agreed a contract, we signed up. I went for my first meeting and I was sitting with them and they said, this 100 shirt that you've got, that's a really nice idea. Do you think we can be a part of that? And I said, well, absolutely. I said, okay, but we need to do the 50 shirt too. Oh, and what about the 10 shirt for the children? So all of a sudden we had these clubs that Nike was prepared to sponsor at the time. And I didn't think that we would have hundreds of people, let alone thousands or millions of people getting T-shirts. So we were really on a roll. We were, they were a great marketing machine. So they were really pressing me and saying, we can do this, we can do that. And then they said, oh, there's just this one thing. And I said, what is it? They said, well, this name, UKTT, it's a bit shit. Which took me back to a conversation I'd had with a volunteer a year before in Bushy Park, just after the parkrun had finished. We were walking to the pheasantry, and he's a very good friend. He helped me write some of the software. His name's Stuart Lodge, and Stuart is so clever. He's always 5 steps ahead of anybody else. So when he says something to me, he's already on the journey, and I'm right at the start, and I'm trying to work out, what is he saying? Anyway, we're walking to the pheasantry, and he said, UKTT, it's a bit shit. You should call it Parkrun. And I said to him, what are you talking about? It's working. Why would I change something that's not working? So it was Stuart who came up with the word Parkrun. I mentioned it to Nike, and they fell for it immediately. Okay. In that instance, they said to me, here you are, there's £10,000. Go and redo your branding. So the branding, as you know today, is as a result of the goodwill of Nike when they were sponsoring us. It's quite amazing. Yeah.
So then Parkrun, you go from Bushy Park, then the next one, a couple of years later, over to Wimbledon, and then suddenly, boom, it takes off.
So Wimbledon was the big turning point. I used to meet with 2 chaps on a regular basis in the local pub once a month, and we would look at what we had, Bushy Park. And the main topic of conversation was, how can you afford this? And how are you going to sustain it? And it was mostly around the fact that pretty much I hadn't asked anybody to do anything at that time. I was doing everything myself. People pitched up and they offered themselves. So there were always volunteers on a Saturday. But I hadn't asked anybody to do anything. I was paying for it all on my own. And that's how I saw the future, really. I had no plan to commercialize it in any way. Anyway, Duncan and Jim constantly questioning me, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And Jim was the worst. He said, this is never going to work. You can't build this without some help. And then one day he walked into the pub and he threw a map on the table and he said, Wimbledon Common, we're doing it. And I said, Jim, I don't want to do any more. I just want my one park run. And he said, you're doing it. And so I think I had to change the software. I had to rewrite the software to make sure that we could have 2 events happening with the same people registered for both events and so on and so forth. And then receiving 2 sets of results and having to process them. Jim helped me. We went to Wimbledon about, I suppose it was 6 weeks later. Started that journey. And within 6 weeks, the idea of volunteering was now real because I knew I couldn't be in 2 places at once. I couldn't do them both. So we said to, I think 6 weeks, we said to the people assembled at Wimbledon Common, we need volunteers. Put your hand up if you're going to. And I think about 12 people put their hands up. And they became the core team for the next 7 or 8 years. Wow. It was quite amazing. I walked away from Wimbledon after 6 or 7 weeks, went back to Bushy, and now I was said, if we can do 2, we can do 4. And if we can do 4, we can do 10. And if we can do 10, we can do 100. And so people asked me, what did you want? And I always used to just say, any place you can have a park and a run in a park, any town, village in the world that wants one can have one.
Yeah.
I still didn't think of us as a conglomerate or a movement or a company or anything. I just thought, this is so good. The product is so brilliant. Why wouldn't you want to share it with everybody in the world? I didn't feel I needed to be the person who made it happen. But slowly but surely, I started to employ people. I became the lawyer. I was doing the sales. I did the marketing. I wrote the software. I was doing everything, most of it badly, but I was still doing everything.
And you fast forward, you've mentioned it's now beginning to catch on. Were you getting the feedback, the impact that it was having? And you mentioned yourself from mental health and where you were when you set it up. But the impact and the benefits of participating in Parkrun, were you beginning to see that from not only the volunteers, but the people who were out every Saturday participating? I
mean, it was plainly obvious. I'm a case study of the benefits of Parkrun. It changes my life every single Saturday, every time I go to the park. But yes, people were telling me every single week how good this is and why I should do more. I can't take credit for turning Parkrun into a mental health charity. That took somebody else. There's a lot of things in Parkrun that happened because somebody came to me and said, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? It took some time for me to understand it. In fact, I think probably back in 2011, 2012, somebody said, you should become a charity. I was dead against it because I felt that charities took advantage of people in a way. They gather this huge amount of resource and build massive staff rooms, and then they don't always give it back to the people who need it. And I had this prejudice. So I was a little bit against it. But it took 2015, I employed a CEO. And when he was interviewing for the job, he said to me, Paul, what do you want from Parkrun? And I just said, I'd like there to be one in every park in the world, wherever possible. And he said to me, it's not good enough. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, it's got no direction. I said, well, we're delivering park runs in parks. He said, what you want to do is help the world improve their health and fitness, their mental and physical health. You want to make the world healthy and happier. And all of a sudden, the light bulb switched on, and I realized that was the true purpose of what we were doing. It definitely wasn't about athletics. It was about being outdoors, being active, and being with friends. That social element. So that was the key ingredient. And it didn't change any of the principles of what I'd started. We might have been a race on day one, but we were no longer a race. We were all about everybody's welcome. Everybody, no matter what your capabilities were, you were entitled to come and enjoy. And it was the people at the back who were getting the most enjoyment and the most fulfillment. So becoming a charity in 2017, I think, really did change things for Parkrun. It's been a long road, but becoming a charity and setting out our objectives to make the world healthier and happier did take away some of the things that perhaps were there right at the beginning, which we weren't really happy to talk about, but they were there. And now, of course, we're area focused. And it's amazing. VHI, you are responsible, along with Matt Shields, Ruth Shields, everybody in this room, collectively, for the thousands of lives who have been improved here in in Ireland. You mentioned, Brian, nearly a tenth of all Irish people signed up for Parkrun. It's a testament to the Irish people, a testament to how I feel when I come to Ireland, how you enact community, how you embrace each other as friends, and you're always jovial and got a little bit of a dig here, a dig there. You're always looking to get one over each other. And it's
you haven't seen me getting going yet. Give me a second.
So I love it, and I think what you've done is extraordinary.
But on that, and that's where I want to bring the conversation into to Ireland. Like you mentioned Matt Shields there, again, can you explain how that came about? Because obviously, you know, you go from Bushy Park, it's Wimbledon, it's very much kind of, you know, in England, UK based. How did it end up coming over here? What happened?
So I think Matt's children live in the United Kingdom, and he was visiting, and grandchildren, that sort of thing, and happened to be at Bushy Park. You know, he'll get a free run wherever he can get one. And he called me up, and this is typical of what happened in the early days. He called me up and he said, "This parkrun thing, can we have it in Ireland?" I can't do the Irish.
Just do that again, actually.
So what I did in those days was I always said, "Let's meet for coffee." And I sat him down and I stared so hard into his eyes. I was looking into his heart. I didn't really care whether he was a commercial person or wasn't. I wanted to know that he wouldn't abuse what I'd created, that he would embody it, and that he would be able to bring it to this wonderful country and to share it with everybody else. And he left that meeting with a set of equipment to get started on the first parkrun in Northern Ireland. Now, of course, that was Waterworks, but he has brought it here. So Matt and Ruth, just like me, we could never have done it on our own. We always needed people to help us. We needed people like yourselves. The true change in Ireland came when we got backing from VHI and the government. I think it's all very well doing what you can with no money, and we did that for a very long time. But the true growth, the true exponential growth only really takes place when you can invest in it and you can make it happen. And as a charity, that's always going to be difficult for us. Yeah. You know, it's very difficult to see how we will be able to run the business without partners. But we have to choose our partners very carefully.
Yeah. And we heard kind of, you know, 2016, 46 park runs, VHI get involved, roll it out. We're now up to 150 park runs. The engagement as well, I think, you know, it's been mentioned, you know, that 9% pushing 10% of the population engaging in a park run. Like, it's amazing, it's fantastic. From your perspective, what makes Ireland so special in that regard?
I think it goes back to your heritage. It goes back to how you used to operate as communities maybe 100 years ago. Church was important. You gathered together in groups, you help each other, you sorted problems out for each other. I think that's a natural thing that exists in this country. Those other establishments maybe are not that important anymore, or at least we're looking for the same companionship and the same fellowship, but we want to find it in other ways. And I think Parkrun, it is a wonderful product. You have to experience it first, and that's the complex part. There's so many people who can't get out the front door, who the thought of running is just too much. And that's why you're only at 10%, not because you haven't worked incredibly hard. It's difficult for me to understand how you could ever be 20% of the population doing parkrun. You're a very mature parkrun country in that there are not that many spaces we can go and create new events. We can increase our junior population, but from a senior events population, I think we're getting close to maturity. So what's going to happen, in my view, is that there's going to be churn. And churn is a good thing. In our view, it's a good thing. People come into parkrun, they don't really know anything about running, they find their feet, they discover they love it, they get fit, they think, hang on a second, I'm fit. I can play football, Gaelic football, netball, tennis, and they go and do other things. Some people stay for forever, and that's absolutely wonderful. But that's the way we keep churn. We keep the new people coming in, we help them find themselves. Parkrun isn't about containment, it's about spreading health and well-being as much as we possibly can.
And you mentioned the junior park runs there as well. Like, again, was that an idea that you had in your head when you started Parkrun, or, you know, how did that come about?
Again, this is another great idea that came from people that I know, people who I've met. Paul Graham was a junior coach, athletic coach, based in St Mary's in Twickenham. And he was doing the parkrun. He was a fellow club mate, and And he kept saying to me, oh, this 5K, it's a bit far for children. And I said, yeah, I know, but the parents will be the judge of whether their children can actually do it or not. It wasn't for me to make those decisions. And he came and said, look, why don't we create a 2K event where children can run free? Yeah. So Paul Graham was the start. And I think following Paul, we started another 4 where we were trialing what it meant from a safeguarding point of view. It's like herding cats. It's not always easy, etc. So we had to learn how to do that. I was on the very, very first parkrun and I was scanning and it was pandemonium. And we didn't know whether we had to corral them into a confined space or could the parents take them away. So we just had to work it out. Chrissy Wellington, international triathlete, I met her in about 2012 or just before that, but she had just come back from a successful international triathlete career and was looking for something to do. And so I asked her to take the concept of junior parkrun and to make something of it. So she looked into the strategy and she worked out what the rules were. And we then had a policy where we decided to expand in United Kingdom. Ireland definitely works because I think we have the same level of control and management. There are other countries where it's far more difficult for us to expand. We're not mature enough in those countries to actually do it. So I think it's a product that's on its way. Mm-hmm. It's a product that is very high value. Everybody there is gaining a new skill. Everybody there is finding that running is something they can do. Yeah. And everybody there will take that with them for the rest of their lives. Mm. Whereas at the 5K parkrun, I think it's not as, the benefits aren't as high.
Okay. And look, the success of Parkrun, I think everyone would agree, it's been a phenomenal story, journey, and a successful story. But success is never a straight line. So, the challenges and setbacks maybe that you've had, setting it up, you mentioned about the software and then kind of scratching your head and going, God, what do I do? Can you tell us a little bit about maybe how you overcame those little things just in order to get the ball rolling and building what it is today?
I think to begin with, it was pretty easy. I was very fortunate. I wasn't looking for sponsorship. I didn't set myself any targets. If people said to me, how big do you want to be? I said, the world's your oyster. I never ever told them really what I had in my game plan. I wrote a strategic plan every single year. The first one, probably in 2007. And then I saw maybe I could do 5 events. And then the next year, maybe I can do 20. So there was always some planning. In that early stage, we were working every single day. Yeah. Every single day of the first 5 years, I spent hours and hours and hours at a computer fixing, modifying, changing stuff. And I would roll it out in a heartbeat. I would just put it out there the next Saturday and I'd get feedback, oh, that's a bit rubbish, or I like that. And then we would pick and choose. We would take stuff away and put new stuff and so on. So I think it worked really, really well for those first few years when we had less than 100,000 people. I think as soon as we started to have 1 million people and a few hundred events, you start to... Well, what I always wanted was the events to have ownership of what they do. I wanted the accountability to be there. We had to provide the tram lines to say, this is how you're allowed to play. But basically, I didn't want the events to feel like they belong to some big body corporate. And I think for the most part, that still works. So it was when that accountability and that ownership started coming back saying, hang on a second, you're playing with our playground. Yeah. You need to at least involve us and consult with us. So I think it's been a tricky road. I think we've had to learn lots of lessons along the way. The bigger we've got, the more professional we've had to become, the more rules we've had. Some of that, I prefer we didn't. Mm. My heart is always, it's simple. We should just engage. Everybody should be respectful of each other. We should never have a fast runner telling a slow runner to get out the way. unfortunately, we live in a society where these things happen. So we have to help our teams manage that, and we have to step in occasionally to help fix things. So it's been, I think it's been 20 years of quite a lot of fun, but at the same time, we've had our moments.
Yeah, I think what's amazing, I think you'd all agree, is the fact that you tried it and you weren't afraid of getting the feedback and you weren't afraid of trying something. And, you know, if I got it wrong, you know, people will tell me and I'll take that on board. It was like, you know, no ego. Let's give it a go and see what happens.
Well, I'm not sure about no ego. I was definitely a dictator. But I wasn't unkind with that.
Yeah.
So there were times when people told me, like Stuart, when Stuart said you should call it Parkrun, I said, come on, Stuart. But I'm prepared to learn. I do make mistakes. I've made many, many mistakes. I've learned much more from my mistakes than I've learned from my successes. And I think I want Parkrun to be a humble place, a place where we can listen to people. We don't always have to get it right. I'm not fastidiously focused on being right all the time. I think it's more important to have that humility, have that understanding, be apologetic when you've made a mistake, to draw people in, make sure that the community works. And it gets really, really hard when you're 2,500 communities that include 10 million people. But we have to make more of an effort. We have to find a way to propagate that communication in a way that does make people feel involved and included. Sometimes when people throw comments at you that are really inappropriate, you have to learn to ignore them, to just move on. So, we're a different beast now than we were 10 years ago.
When you look at Parkrun now, like you mentioned volunteers, you know, and even that simple going for a coffee afterwards, like that is incredibly important to an awful lot of park runners. And, you know, socially, you know, in the community, getting together, that engagement is like, that's one of the key benefits of Parkrun now, is that social engagement. Again, from your perspective, that must make you feel quite proud of what has become. It's not just about, as you said, getting out, running, walking. It's everything that's involved in Parkrun nowadays.
I think the people in this room will really understand it, because most of them, or in fact probably every single one of them, are volunteers. So I recently got arthritis in the knee, and it meant that I can run occasionally, but it really hurts and it's not much fun. But I did choose to run this last weekend, and the magic that happens at Parkrun, it's extraordinary. You know, if we could bottle that or make a pill, it would change this world. But so my personal engagement this weekend was, I drove to a Parkrun, 20 kilometers or so to get there. Didn't particularly want to be noticed, so I'm under the radar. Morning's not a great time, so I'm slightly, and then
Didn't have your coffee, no?
Someone taps me on the shoulder and say, "Are you Paul?" Yeah. And before I know it, I'm smiling. You know, they've got something nice to say.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I managed to do the run. And the run, I've said already, it is part of the health pill. It is part of what changed me. And I finished it in 26 minutes, no less. And I was exuberant. I mean, absolutely amazed that I'd done this, because I've run twice this year. So 26 minutes, I finish it, I'm not hurting, it's great, and then I go for coffee. And these kids are coming to talk to me, and one of them is 9, and he's just run 1948. A PB.
Oh my God.
And the mothers are there, and and that conversation, I was on a high for the rest of the weekend. Honestly, it changes my whole perspective on the week. And it's the coffee, it's the social. I mean, when I go for coffee, I like to go for coffee with my mates, people I know, and I can be irreverent, I can swear, and I can just be myself, and nobody judges me, and it's all great. When I'm in coffee with parkrunners, I've got to be a little more careful, and I am. But generally speaking, it's a wonderful experience. People are always positive. They always tell me about how their life has changed. And it is about their change. They made it happen. We provided a playground. We provided how to play in the playground, but they came along. They made the decision. And it's every single step that they take and every single interaction that they have, which is life-changing. They say that I did it. I didn't really. We all did it. Every single one of us is part of it. And it's just the most extraordinary thing ever.
It's probably a hard question to answer, and you've kind of touched on it there, but your proudest moment, is there a moment over the last 2 decades that stands out? The realization, like when you get into bed, on a Saturday and you think, oh my God, how many people actually did a park run? And that was my idea. It's something immensely to be proud of. Is there any one moment that stands out?
There are three things that I'd like to talk about. So in 2014, I was given a CBE. Now, I'm a very ordinary person. I'm not particularly clever. I'm not smart. I'm just an ordinary person who did something from his bottom of his heart, which happens to be good. And it's worked. It could have failed, but it's worked. And so never in my wildest dream did I ever think in my whole life that I would ever be awarded anything for anything. I mean, when I was in work, I used to get the occasional prize for doing some good work. And, I was a high achiever, but it's not important. It's just about delivering a piece of work. This is quite extraordinary. And then a couple of years later, the RSA, Royal Society of Arts and Literature, they awarded me something called the Albert Medal. Now, this is something that's been awarded once a year for the last 200 odd years, since 1789. And it includes people like Stephen Fry and the chap who invented penicillin. I forget his name.
Don't put me on the spot. Was it Pastor?
The inventor of the internet. These are extraordinary people who have done extraordinary things, and they want to put my name on that list. So that's just another, it's another thing that it's hard to understand. Yeah. It's hard to fathom. But equally, on Saturday, when I was going to Parkrun, I got a text from my niece, and she had just done her first parkrun. She's mid-20s. She'd just done her first parkrun with her mother in South Africa. And she texted me to say, I've done it. And it's that. Yeah. It's every single time somebody says to me, my life has changed. The numbers are unfathomable. You can't really put your hand around it. I never really cared about the numbers. I know that they're big and I know that they're meaningful. But it's what happens in the park on a Saturday, and you meet that individual and they tell you from their perspective how much it means to them. Then you know. Yeah. And that feeling that I had on Saturday, my flesh and blood, it's done a park run, late 20s. And I'm thinking, God, this is it. It's amazing. So yes, it's quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think we're all kind of smiling at a story like that because we see that, and a lot of people in this room see that every Saturday. Whether it's a regular park runner or it's someone for their first time, the buzz that you get after, and that exhilaration out in the open, green exercise, all that. A few kind of quick questions for you, because I know there'll be a lot of people kind of wondering, your best park run. Like, you've been to so many, and it's probably hard to pick one. And you're probably going to say Bushy Park in London, but is there any park run that stands out?
There are a few.
Now remember, you're in Ireland here, just, yeah. And you're going somewhere on Saturday, all right? Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the park.
Begins with an M.
Yeah. So there are some extraordinary park runs that I've been to, and often the more extraordinary, the less beautiful they are. So we've got Bushy Park, you've got Marley Park, You even got to pretend bushy parks there. You've got some extraordinary parks, and they are beautiful and they're wonderful. But if I can think back, the things that stand out for me, I was in South Africa. Got all my country managers together for a conference, and I went to the deepest, darkest part of South Africa, and I arrived at the start line, and all I could see was maize, well above my head, maize fields just going for everywhere. The car pulled up. It wasn't a car park. It was a dirt track, and there were a bunch of cars there, and all these locals had gathered, probably 20, most of them teenagers. And they had flip-flops on. And the adults were gathered there. There was a little bit of a speech, welcome Paul, etc., and so on. And one of them had a cone under his arm, a big witch's hat, And I thought, I wonder what's going on here. Anyway, on your marks, get set, go. And all you've got is this red dust path heading into nowhere. And we're running, and of course, these young athletes are well ahead, and one they're stopping to take off their flip-flops and put it on their arm. And I can't keep up, but I'm running. And the guy with the cone is the fastest guy. And he's running to the turn point. He puts the cone down, turns around, and he runs back. Now that would break all sorts of rules at Parkrun. Okay. And I understand we need rules, but there were 20 young teenagers who didn't give a hoot about rules. They were running 5K. We were recording it. I don't really care whether it was 5K or not. It was the most extraordinary experience. And we stopped for coffee with them afterwards. And isn't that what it's about?
Yeah.
Of course, you're in a mature country and you have to have rules and you have to make sure people do the right thing. Just as an aside, when I was running last weekend, 2-lapper, and it goes out and you get this little wiggle and you can see the finish just over there. And the guy in front of me, running with a hoodie and headphones, just went straight across the grass to the finish. So I carried on. I noticed who he was and so on. And then I was finishing my second lap and he was just in front of me. And he finished just in front of me. So I went, and this event that I did is about 40 weeks long. So it hasn't been going very long. And I went to the event, I reckon, and said, that chap, he didn't do the whole course. And she was just about to go and stop. And I said, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Just make a note of it. You don't have to change his position. He's cheating himself. He's not cheating anybody. Just let him, but maybe you can find out why and understand. He might have been there looking after someone else. There could be a million reasons why he did what he did. Yeah. And it's not the end of the world.
No, absolutely. So, it's great story. We're just going to take a couple of questions, okay? So we're going to get a microphone to you. We'll get a mic just up here. Here we go.
Hi guys, Regina from the Pretend Bushy. Just one of the things I was reading during the week, a diary of a woman, one of the climate protesters who is now serving 4 or 5 years in a UK prison for protesting. But one of the things in her diary was she recently got moved to another prison where there's a parkrun. And she was saying that this is a highlight of her week. All the challenges she had during the week, but Saturday morning was parkrun. Whose genius idea was it to bring parkrun to prisons?
I didn't hear the question properly.
So, parkruns in prisons.
Okay.
There was a lady in a diary who had spoken about, the importance of parkrun as a highlight of her week. Whose idea was it to bring it to a prison?
This is another example of where you guys make things happen. It's just extraordinary. So, Derry, can you remember his name? So there's a prison warder in Blackcomb Prison who was also a park runner. And he thought, wouldn't it be great if we could do the same thing in our prison? He brought the idea to us. Chrissy Wellington, who was head of health and well-being at the time, decided to look into it and formed a group that looked into parkrun in prisons. Now, you can imagine there's a lot of pitfalls in parkrun prisons, but by far the most extraordinary benefits for those who engage. I've been to 2 parkruns in prisons. One is a high security women's prison, and the other was a youth offender prison. It's not my best experience in the world. I'm nervous of going in prison in case they don't let me out. It's part of my personality. I hate being on the wrong side of anything. So I don't want a fine, I don't want anything. I just hate it. So it's difficult for me to do that. But going inside and spending time with those people, especially the women, was groundbreaking for me. It changed me as a person. I'm sure it's changing them. So they have to earn the right to be on the start line, whether that's as a volunteer or a participant. And that is a behavioral change technique and tool that spreads throughout the prison. They can't have hundreds of people doing parkrun, so it's down to a select maybe 30. And it's an equalizer when you go in there and they tell you, they don't always tell you what they've done, but they do, the humility is there, they've realized they've done something, they want to be reunited with the world in a good way. I met a chap who was in prison probably for a drugs offense or something, nothing really serious, but he was a thug on the streets, went into prison, was going even further down that route, and then found parkrun. Completely changed his life. Came out, started a running club. This is a tall black fellow based in Manchester, and he started a running club. They have over 300 members now. And it's all about educating street kids how they can change and adjust their lives. So it is remarkable, but again, it's an idea that came from you.
Yeah. And again, just to acknowledge, in Mountjoy, they have the Progression Park Run, and you can actually put your name on a list and go in, and I'd highly recommend. I know there's people in this room who have done it, and it is, you know, it's eye-opening and very, very interesting as well, and you learn an awful lot. Another question there? Anyone got a question? Yeah, we'll get a mic.
How you doing? Frank here from Irish Runner magazine. You have a great ambassador there in David Gillick. So
Good man, Frank.
Obviously,
I'll give you that €50 later on.
Well. Yeah. Just like to say that he's doing a great job.
Yeah, he just said that. Yeah. There's another hand went up there. Yeah, we'll get a microphone to you.
I do stammer.
It's okay.
This might take a little while, so anyway. I wondered, Paul, what you thought the greatest threat to parkrun was now.
So the greatest threat to parkrun now?
The greatest threat?
Yeah.
Money. Without a shadow of a doubt. Look, what is Parkrun? Parkrun's a charity. Our focus is to make the world healthier and happier. We can stay where we are if we like. United Kingdom, the other 20-odd countries. We can choose not to expand what we do, and the same 400,000 or different, the 400,000 people per week will keep coming, and we'll still be doing good stuff. But we won't be expanding. We won't be helping other people to change their lives or to have an improved mental and physical well-being. So it's a good question, and it's a question that we have to ask ourselves every single year. What is our strategy and where we're going to take it and what we need to do? If we want to continue helping those who need it most to experience this magic, then we need to grow. And if we are going to grow, we need the resources to grow. Now, there are all sorts of gotchas on how we do that. We can make mistakes all the time. We can sign up with a partner and it doesn't work out. It's a bad partnership, and that partnership reflects all the way back down to you. We could follow a strategy of generating our own income, and it can work or it can fail, whatever. So I think that is always going to be our biggest threat. Alongside that is making sure that we have the right level of management and oversight to make sure that every single pound or euro that we have is properly and wisely spent, delivering the best bang for buck. So I think we have to treat this like we're a commercial company. We need to show that we're keeping our costs as low as possible, at the same time expanding as far as we can given what our resources are. But don't go too far. Just, you've got to manage it. So I think that's our biggest threat.
Yeah, excellent. Paul, I could chat to you, all day, all night, and I think everyone else here has been fascinated by your story, your openness, and just generally, the success of Parkrun over the last couple of decades. And we just want to say a massive thank you. Thank you from, everyone here in the room. You've changed so many lives here in Ireland, and long may it continue. So thank you.
Thank you.